Do you have a paranormal encounter you'd like to share with us? Send us an email with your story for a chance of it being featured on Weird World. In this collection of two compelling accounts of encounters with parallel universes, join Blake Hudson in 2012 as he stumbles upon his neighbourhood transformed during a drive, leading him to an altered, seemingly futuristic version of his local McDonald's. Then follow 9-year-old Connor Sanderson in 2014 as he emerges into a parallel version of his father's office building, leading both to question their reality. McDonald's in the multiverse. In the early months of 2012, 25-year-old Blake Hudson found himself deeply engrossed in a coding project. However, as he sat hunched over his computer, fingers flying across the keyboard, he soon became hungry. So Blake decided to take a brief break from his work and venture out to find something to eat. Living in quite a rural area of the western United States, Blake's options for food on the fly were always fairly limited, with his nearest fast food restaurant a local McDonald's. Given the urgency of returning to his coding, with no time to spare getting properly dressed or taking a shower, he opted for a quick trip to its drive-through. Leashing his dog Max, Blake headed out into the fading light of the evening. The sun had just dipped behind the mountains on the horizon, casting a dim glow over the neighbourhood as he loaded Max into the car and turned the ignition. As Blake navigated the winding streets of his neighbourhood, he noticed an odd occurrence. The street lamps seemed to flicker out as he passed beneath them, only flickering back on once he had moved on. Initially dismissing it as a strange coincidence, Blake continued on his way, shrugging them off as being faulty. Upon reaching one of the final turns before exiting the neighbourhood, Blake brought his car to a halt at a stop sign. Suddenly, a mysterious wave of energy washed over him, sending a shiver down his spine. From the back seat, Max let out a whimper, prompting Blake to glance back at him. To his surprise, Max had retreated to the middle of the seat, tail tucked between his legs and fur standing on end. The sensation that engulfed Blake felt akin to passing through a thick sheet of static electricity, accompanied by a deafening feedback noise that reverberated inside his head. The world around him blurred, and for a few unsettling seconds, Blake struggled to make sense of his surroundings. As the strange phenomenon subsided, Blake realised that his car had stalled during the incident. With a turn of the key, the engine came back to life, and he cautiously proceeded past the stop sign. However, as he merged onto the main road, an astonishing sight greeted him. The streets, once a familiar black, now possessed an iridescent white sheen that illuminated the entire area. The street lights that typically lined the road's central dividing strip had vanished, replaced by towering trees that cast eerie shadows across the transformed landscape. Perplexed by the sudden change, Blake sought comfort in the familiar golden arches of McDonald's, still visible in the distance. Yet even this beacon of normalcy had undergone a transformation. The restaurant now occupied a much larger building, a stark contrast to the modest establishment Blake had frequented countless times before. Undeterred, he continued forward, his curiosity piqued by the strange transformations that had unfolded around him. As Blake approached the solitary stoplight separating him from his destination, his attention was drawn to the vehicle ahead. It was a model he had never encountered before, adorned with a silver circle emblem resembling a stylized eagle that you might see on a coat of arms. Upon the eagle's chest, a cursive G was emblazoned, and the name Vapor was prominently displayed on the car's exterior. Despite the unfamiliar branding of the car, the license plate remained identical to those Blake had grown accustomed to seeing. Passing through the intersection, Blake's mind raced with questions about the bizarre changes he was witnessing. As he pulled up to the McDonald's drive-thru, he was greeted by an array of LCD screens displaying featured menu items and looping video clips of smiling patrons enjoying their meals. To his relief, his usual order remained available, albeit $2 more than he was used to paying. Reaching the payment window, Blake had his credit card at the ready, eager to complete the order. The worker greeted him and Blake handed over his card, anticipating a routine payment process. However, the worker's response caught him off guard. "We don't accept that here," the employee stated, handing Blake a peculiar gadget resembling a small finger monitor. Taken aback by the unfamiliar payment method, Blake inquired, "Oh, can I just pay with cash?" The worker, slightly puzzled, replied, "Cash? Sure, I guess." Blake handed over a crisp $20 bill, which the worker scrutinised far longer than necessary. To Blake's surprise, the employee returned his receipt without any change. When Blake questioned the discrepancy, the worker's confusion only deepened. "We don't have cash at this location, sir. We can only give cash vouchers," he explained. Perplexed but resigned, Blake examined his receipt, noticing a line at the bottom that read, "Cash value $11.26. Deciding it was good enough to accept, he proceeded to the next window to collect his meal. After a brief wait, the next worker appeared, holding Blake's order and wearing a broad smile. As he handed over the bag, Blake habitually placed the receipt inside. However, the worker suddenly exclaimed, "Oh wait, I forgot your fries. Can I have the bag back, please?" Blake obliged, returning the bag to the worker. Moments later, the employee reappeared, approaching the window to hand the bag back to Blake with a cheerful expression. "I hope you have a great day," the worker said, but as the words left his mouth, his voice began to glitch in an unsettling manner. The repetitions were not natural, resembling the mechanical skipping and fragmentation of a badly scratched CD. The worker's face and body movements also mirrored the glitch, resetting and stuttering in kind. As the glitch persisted, Blake once again felt the familiar wave of electricity wash over him. Max's whimper once again echoed from the back seat, and a quick glance revealed that he was crouched in a defensive posture, fur standing on end just as before. The deafening feedback noise returned, flooding Blake's mind as his eyes struggled to adjust to the shifting reality around him. When the world finally came into focus, Blake found himself in a parking lot, the very same lot where his usual McDonald's stood. A glance in the rearview mirror confirmed that the restaurant had indeed returned to its familiar appearance. Shaken but still hungry, Blake decided to purchase his meal once more. To his bewilderment, the $20 bill he had previously handed over was missing. With no other choice, he completed the transaction with his credit card and began the journey back home. As he drove, Blake's mind raced with questions about the baffling shift in reality he had just experienced. He was certain he had not imagined it. The details were too vivid and fresh in his mind. Although he lacked a clear explanation for the strange transformations, Blake was certain of one thing. His perspective of the world he thought he knew had been forever altered. Elevator to elsewhere. In the year 2014, Connor Sanderson, only 9 years old at the time, experienced an event that would forever change his perception of reality. The incident took place in the city of Madison, Wisconsin, where Connor's father, James Sanderson, worked as an attorney in a 4-story office building. Every Friday, it had become a family tradition for Connor's mother, Polly, to pick up Connor and his siblings, Sophie and baby brother Noah from school and daycare. They would then visit James at his office before heading out for a family dinner in separate cars. Connor, at this stage in his life, was fiercely independent, insisting on doing most things on his own, from cooking to laundry. However, there was one task he was particularly adamant about doing alone: riding the elevator. On one fateful Friday afternoon, on September 12, 2014, the Sanderson family arrived at James' office as usual. Connor spent his time running around the building, interacting with his father's colleagues, oblivious to the strange encounter that awaited him. When it was time to leave, Polly found Connor in an office cubicle he wasn't supposed to be in and instructed him to get ready to go. Connor raced towards the elevator, and his parents, well aware of his determination to ride alone, told him to wait for them on the ground floor. As Connor stepped into the elevator, an overwhelming sense of dread consumed him. It wasn't claustrophobia, as this was never a fear he had suffered from, but rather an intense feeling of impending doom, urging him to escape. Before he could react, the elevator doors closed. In his flustered state, Connor accidentally pressed the button for the 4th floor, where he already was. To his bewilderment, instead of the doors reopening, the elevator began to ascend for what seemed like an eternity. When the doors finally opened, Connor was confronted with a sight that left him petrified. The 4th floor that greeted him was eerily different from the one he had just left. The once opaque glass door panes were now transparent. The tiled floor had transformed into a different material, and the walls had shifted from a greyish tone to a greenish colour. The entire office layout had been altered, and the logo bearing his father's law firm name, usually prominently displayed above the reception desk, had vanished. Connor remained motionless, scanning the unfamiliar surroundings for what felt like 5 minutes, until a janitor who had been vacuuming noticed him. The man approached Connor, asking about his parents' whereabouts and offering assistance. Connor, struggling to find his voice, managed to utter, "I'm lost." The janitor attempted to persuade Connor to accompany him to the reception desk so they could search for his parents. Just as Connor was about to comply, the feeling of danger resurfaced, urging him to stand his ground and remain in the elevator at all costs. Connor informed the janitor that he would simply return to the 1st floor to await his family, and the man agreed, insisting on accompanying him to ensure he wasn't alone. As the elevator descended and the doors opened on the 1st floor, Connor was shocked to see his family waiting for him. It was impossible for them to have reached the ground floor before him, as the building had only one elevator, and Connor had never left it. Moreover, Polly had Noah in a stroller, making it virtually impossible for them to have used the stairs. Overwhelmed by confusion, Connor ran into his parents' arms, sobbing uncontrollably. When he had calmed down enough to explain what had happened, his parents appeared just as perplexed as he was. Connor questioned how they had arrived at the 1st floor before him, to which they replied, "What do you mean we went down before you?" Connor described the floor he had encountered, but James insisted that it couldn't have existed, as every level of the building followed the same floor plan and design. Desperate for his parents to believe him, Connor pleaded with them to ask the janitor who had accompanied him down, as he was the only person who could corroborate his story. Polly's response sent a chill down Connor's spine. "What are you talking about, sweetie? You're the only person in the elevator." Connor looked behind him, flabbergasted to see the elevator completely empty. No one on the janitorial staff matched the description of the man Connor had encountered, and he was never seen again. The experience left Connor so traumatised that he developed a fear of elevators that persisted until he was around 14 years old. He never set foot in that particular elevator again during the 2 years his father continued to work in that building. Now 19, Connor firmly believes that he travelled to a parallel universe on that September afternoon, although for many years the incident haunted him, causing him severe anxiety and leaving him to question his own sanity.